The Diddy verdict is crazy. After a prolonged courtroom drama filled with shocking testimonies and global attention, Sean Diddy Combs has been found guilty. But not on the most serious counts. On July 2, 2025, a jury in Manhattan delivered a split verdict. The 55-year-old music mogul was acquitted of both sex trafficking and racketeering charges. However, they convicted him on 2 counts of transporting women for prostitution under the Federal Mann Act. That carries a potential total sentence of up to 20 years behind bars. Those charges involve Cassandra Cassie Ventura Fine, his ex-girlfriend, and another woman identified in court only as Jane. This outcome concluded an intense 8-week federal trial centered on explosive claims, drug-induced orgies, allegations of emotional manipulation, and multiple instances of alleged physical abuse. These revelations struck at the heart of one of music's most powerful figures. Even though Combs avoided convictions that could have resulted in life in prison under racketeering statutes, he wasn't spared from criminal judgment. His legal challenges continue. At issue were accusations that he leveraged his status, wealth, and industry influence to compel romantic partners and associates into highly sexualized events known as freak-offs, gatherings involving male escorts, substance use, and alleged violence. These events reportedly took place across various U.S. cities, including Los Angeles and Miami, and even internationally in Saint-Tropez. During the trial, both Cassie and Jane delivered emotionally charged testimony detailing years of emotional and physical mistreatment. They described being slapped, choked, dragged, and coerced into performing sexual acts while under the influence. One escort said he was paid thousands. Some sessions were even documented on video by Combs himself. But while their testimonies were riveting, the jury concluded prosecutors hadn't proven coercion or trafficking beyond a reasonable doubt. That legal standard kept the most serious charges from sticking. However, transporting individuals across state lines for prostitution doesn't require proof of coercion, only that sex was bought and travel occurred for that purpose. That's where the Mann Act comes in. Enacted in 1910, the Mann Act criminalizes transporting individuals across state or national borders for prostitution or any immoral sexual activity. The jury found enough evidence that Cassie and Jane were flown by Combs explicitly for paid sexual encounters, sufficient grounds for conviction under this law. Immediately after the verdict was read, Combs appeared deeply emotional, bowing his head into the seat, pressing his palms together in a gesture of prayer, then blowing kisses toward his children. His attorneys embraced in relief. But the celebrations would be cut short. Judge Aaron Subramanian, who oversaw the trial, rejected Combs' plea for bail prior to sentencing. Despite the acquittals, the judge determined that Combs still posed a potential threat to the public. Subramanian underscored the disturbing testimony presented by both women, along with admissions of domestic violence from the defense. He cited courtroom moments like, "We own the domestic violence? We own it." The judge emphasized that Combs had failed to meet the burden of proving exceptional circumstances needed for release. The sheer weight of the abuse evidence justified continued detention. Federal prosecutors echoed these concerns in court filings. They detailed a pattern of abuse spanning years, including an incident in June 2024 where Jane accused Combs of physically choking and dragging her across a hotel room. That occurred just a few months before his September arrest. Combs' lead defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, attempted to reframe the June 2024 altercation as potentially self-defense. He also noted that Combs had enrolled in a batterer's intervention program prior to his arrest. Agnifilo portrayed Combs as regretful and disciplined, claiming he would not flee and had been a model prisoner. But Judge Subramanian found those arguments insufficient. Combs will remain in federal custody in Brooklyn, at least until his sentencing, scheduled for October 3, 2025, though his defense has petitioned for an earlier date. Each conviction can bring up to 10 years in prison. While federal sentencing guidelines suggest a range of 51 to 63 months, the judge will have final say, and he has signaled he views these crimes as serious, even violent offenses. Although a criminal conviction won't necessarily result in all of Combs' assets being seized, the fallout reaches beyond the courtroom. More than 80 civil lawsuits are active against him, alleging wrongful conduct ranging from rape to trafficking. Defense attorney Tenny Garagos, who led the criminal case, argued the jury's verdict weakens these civil claims. "She has not sexually assaulted anybody, certainly has not sex trafficked anybody," she said, pointing out the jury. But civil lawyers like Tony Busby, who represents more than half of Combs' accusers, strongly disagree. Busby emphasized the criminal trial involved only 2 women, and that other plaintiffs cite different incidents and evidence that are not countered by this verdict. Douglas Wigdor, who represented Cassie, praised her bravery on the stand. Although the jury did not find Combs guilty of sex trafficking Cassie beyond a reasonable doubt, he said, she paved the way for a jury to find him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. He went on to add, "She displayed unquestionable strength and brought attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit. This case proved that change is long overdue." Cassie and Combs were in an on-again, off-again relationship from 2007 to 2018. Her testimony was among the most vivid in court, detailing years of emotional control and physical abuse. At one point, she described a sexual act involving a male escort urinating in her mouth, an act her legal team insisted was consensual, but she claimed it wasn't. The verdict also leaves long-lasting repercussions for Combs' reputation and finances. Once at the pinnacle of hip-hop's hierarchy, this ruling alters his legacy forever. James Trusty, a former Department of Justice official, has noted that prosecutors lost their best path to seize Combs' assets, like property, airplanes, and business holdings, because those seizures depend on convictions for trafficking or racketeering. However, some asset forfeiture could still proceed if the government proves specific possessions were used to facilitate prostitution offenses. Even with these limitations, Trusty stresses that key parts of Combs' empire remain safe from federal grasp. Despite escaping life-lengthening sentences, Combs is almost certain to spend years behind bars. The judge has already confirmed these convictions count as violent crimes, making bail all but impossible. Prosecutors laid out a portrait of Combs as a brutal, controlling figure who used intimidation and physical force throughout his relationships and circle. In court, many witnesses described him as erratic and even sadistic. While defense lawyers worked hard to humanize him as flawed but redeemable, the court record suggests substantial damage has been done, both to victims and to his public image. Combs' fate now awaits Judge Subramanian's decision in October. Following that, the deluge of civil litigation will continue. In the broader landscape, this trial will be remembered as a turning point. The story of one of hip-hop's most dominant figures held criminally accountable in the Now or Me Too era, albeit on narrower grounds than prosecutors initially sought. The next chapter isn't written yet. Will the judge impose a harsh sentence? Will civil courts hold him to account? And ultimately, how will the public remember this? Diddy's saga isn't over. It's entered its most consequential phase yet.